Hello and welcome, everybody, to a new fic I shall be reading called Heroes and Hermits by Al Alganaver. I'm sorry if I butchered that name. On AO3. Chapter 1. It's Raining Men. Being a top pro hero meant having to deal with all sorts of strange encounters while out on the streets. Kelgo, now only known as Pro Hero Hawks, was familiar with sleepless nights and packed days of meetings, calls, patrols, and bureaucracy. Having to smile all the time, being there in moments of need, socializing with his fans, Hawks did that every day. Some days were better than others, and his life, overall, wasn't as bad as it could have been. And getting to know Tsukuyomi was a positive too. A student from UA accompanying him for internship was some deviation from Hawk's typical routine, and the kid was a pleasant company. Birds of a feather stick together, eh? For patrols, at least. Tokiyami was a decent fighter, but Hawks preferred to take out bad guys on his own. Still, not everything a hero did included fighting. Surprisingly enough, his job also included having bodies randomly drop dead from the sky right on him. Not an everyday occurrence in Musutafu, thankfully. If this was part of some bizarre villain plan or not, he had no time to guess. One moment, he and Tokuyomi were chatting after a full day of work, and next his feathers alerted him of rapid movement above. Everything happened in his blink. Him pushing his teenage sidekick away, a red mass smashing into the ground where they were standing just a few seconds ago. Hawks couldn't have caught it at this speed. Even if he had time, only after the impact, only after the first shock had passed, did Hawks notice the shape of the fallen object. A fallen person. First thing his eyes caught on were bright, colorful wings, their color easily distinguishable, even in the dark. Broken feathers floated around them now. Mangled wings of the stranger looked horribly damaged, crooked, and torn up. His own wings twitched involuntarily. God, it must have been painful even before the fall. As Hawks directed Tokoyami to call an ambulance, he got a better look at the fallen person. Closer, he could see the face of a young man covered in dried blood, a wound on his head that have stopped bleeding some time ago. Did not look fatal. From his own experience, Hawks could relate the wound to smashing his head against something. This person could have hit something mid-flight, or they were hit. Hawks took out his emergency bandages and continued to look for other injuries as he carefully bandaged the man's head. The man was wearing a red sweater, which looked miraculously well considering the general condition of its owner. Simple brown pants covering bird legs? Well, Hawks wasn't surprised. Plenty of bird mutation quirks had this effect. What surprised him more was how those thin bones didn't break on impact. Never mind the spine. He wasn't going to risk checking it until medics would arrive here. When Tokoyami confirmed that the ambulance and police were on their way, Hawks nodded and told him to stay alert. Hawks needed to assess the scene of the incident. Flying up, he proceeded to check the surrounding area for clues on their mysterious victim, but no blood or signs of fighting could be found. At the speed the guy had fallen on them, it was a miracle he was alive, really. Perhaps he fell high from the sky. But what could he encounter so high up to bash his head against? Was the wound from before he took off? Was he being chased, or was he escaping someone? Hawks knew almost every winged person from around the country, mostly waiting for a worthy sidekick, and he'd never heard of anyone who had wings that big and bright. Flight quirks were rare, and the Hero Commission would take note of a strong quirk user being born. Thinking back, that man was suspiciously similar to him. Circumstances such as these were not an accident. Kelgo, after gliding lower and watching the medics take this guy with him, was consumed by paranoid thoughts. He should follow them in case his suspicions turned out true. He flew down, landing near the ambulance, and saw a police officer coming to him, answering all the questions as quickly as he could. He barely made it in time to hop into the ambulance under the pretense of investigation. It was kinda true. Under a better lighting of an overhead lamp, Hawks could see new little details in the stranger's appearance. The lack of shoes on his bird legs, a weird watch-looking device on his arm, some old scars on his neck peeking from under his sweater, and soon one of the medics cleaned up his face, making obvious the fact that this man was not Japanese. Hawks exhaled in relief. Now he knew it wasn't a clone. Their faces were nothing alike. It was just his paranoia whispering from the back of his mind, making Kelgo see a Nomu in every corner. Could still be a new kind of Nomu, yes. Or some other creation that the villains had come up with. So he did not let his guard down, carefully monitoring the weak breathing in case the stranger decided to wake up and start resisting. Hawk spent the rest of the trip in consecration. When they would arrive, staff at the hospital would hopefully be able to find out the identity of this guy and take care of him. If not, then Hawks had a sneaky suspicion that would lead to internal investigation. Ugh, that would mean more meetings and paperwork. And yet there was a strange itch growing in Hawks. Weird encounters like this didn't happen without a reason. The atmosphere was colder somehow, and it grew heavier the longer Hawks stared at the stranger in front of him. Despite the man being asleep, it felt as he was gazing back at Kelgo, like standing in front of 1,000 cameras and microphones. Hawks was a pro hero trained to smile for the camera, but Kelgo always dreaded interviews. Waking up in random places was something Impulse was used to. Sleepovers at others' bases, adventures in the wilderness, various pranks from his friends. All kinds of random events that could lead him finding himself in a new place, sometimes in the bed of someone else. Even so, it was the first time he woke up in a hospital bed. Like in some sort of movie. It made him feel like the main character with amnesia. Oh, wait. How did he end up here? Great. Great! Wonderful, even. Here he was, in a story. Lost and alone in a hospital bed, no friends by his side, and he couldn't remember anything about getting here. His head was too dizzy to think. Impulse decided to simply rest until his body was well enough to cooperate. As he laid there resting, Impulse tried to recount his last memories and maybe come up with a conclusion. Sadly, his mind only brought up the last Bodum meeting and his work on the factory. Nothing that could result in him being at a hospital. More so because Hermitcraft didn't have a hospital. If someone was sick or injured, they were usually cared for in someone's base. If it wasn't anything serious or cured by an admin. There rarely were problems a simple respawn or a command couldn't fix. The same was true to other servers, and from that he could only draw one conclusion. He was far, far away from the universe he called home. He'd never been outside of server worlds. Impulse was startled when someone gently knocked on the door, and a second later they came in. Of course, he was expecting a doctor to show up, but the short old lady at the door wasn't the type he had imagined. She wore a medical coat, and her general look was friendly enough to assure Impulse that no danger would come from her, he hoped. And he had been wrong before when he assumed Zedef was harmless. A white coat on Hermitcraft was a sign. Poisonous frogs had bright colors and spots. Wasps had stripes. Crazy scientists had white lab coats.
I see you're awake, dear. How are you feeling?
She asked in a typical old lady voice, slow but kind. Honestly, I'm exhausted, even though I just woke up. Impulse answered with a smile, trying to make a good first impression. What happened to me? Am I, dying?
I'm sorry you feel tired. It's just a side effect of my quirk. And before I answer your questions, can you tell me your name?
He did not understand anything she said, but nodded and told her, My name is Impulse, and you? Chiyu Shuzenji.
But you, dear, should call me by my hero name, Recovery Girl. As for what happened to you, Impulse, I'm afraid I can't tell you for sure. You see, you are at UA High School in a medical wing because our students found you when you fell from the sky on our lawn. Out of nowhere, they said. How you showed up here is something only you can know.
High school? Impulse looked around the room. He knew little about human schools, but this medical place looked too advanced to be part of a regular school. In all the shows he had watched before, schools had basically one bed and, one always angry nurse. Except that one series where it was a wizarding school and the nurse was a witch, but this place looked like it came straight out of a TV show about doctors with all kinds of fancy machines and stuff. What a weird world to wake up in. And then he thought, what's a hero name? Is that why this place is so well equipped and clean? Because of superheroes? How did you say it? UA High School? Where's that exactly? He asked carefully, avoiding openly admitting his ignorance. Who knew how the locals would react to an outsider, considering that their admin, if they had one, hadn't showed up yet? Maybe this lady was the admin, thought Impulse for a second. No, she couldn't be. Not without the usual presence all admins operators had. This world wasn't hers. Impulse had been to a lot of servers and knew well how a territorial admin would feel like, especially if their world was invaded. If there was an admin nearby, Impulse would have been either kicked or killed.
I know you weren't a local, Impulse. You don't look like one.
Impulse could hear footsteps outside the door as the doctor spoke.
You're in Musutafu, Japan. And though your Japanese sounds impeccable, it's obvious you're not from here.
Seconds after her words, a new person came in. It was a tall, buff man with the strangest outfit, even by Hermitcraft standards, dressed in a red skin-tight suit with pipes, and he had sharp canines on his lower jaw, visible even with his mouth closed in a tense expression. Impulse could describe him as a modern vampire orc stripper. Ah, a typical superhero then. Impulse sat higher on the bed. His head was clearer now, and his stomach had already stopped trying to crawl out of his mouth. If he was to talk with this serious-looking dude, might as well not look pitiful and punchable. With Recovery Girl, Impulse was certain she wouldn't reach his face to punch him. His back hurt from sitting up, but it was tolerable. Hi, Impulse waved in greeting, looking up at the man's face. He would need all of his charm to ease the situation. Glad to see you're awake. Good morning. I'm Pro Hero Vlad King. You are trespassing on private property, and you better have a good explanation as to why you showed up uninvited and scared my students. When they brought you in, you looked like a bloody mess. Well, excuse me, but I have no clue myself. I'm Impulse, by the way. Nice to meet you. Vlad King exhaled, flexing his shoulders in annoyance. He did have a teacher vibe to him, thought Impulse, with that tired look in his eyes and that commanding stern voice, counting his chances to stay on the man's good side. Impulse hoped to get more information out of his new acquaintances. Better do everything in his power to not get banned. To start, he should find out about his belongings. He lay in bed he lay in bed dressed in a hospital gown, and he could not feel his communicator on his arm. It was the most important thing if you get stranded away from your admin, away home. Impulse repressed his panic to concentrate on his diplomatic actions. Before he could ask anything, Vlad King addressed him again. We can't leave you here for long. During the day, you will be transferred to a general hospital while we investigate this incident. While you don't appear to have malicious intent, it's still a rather strange situation. You're lucky none of my students were harmed. Otherwise, I would have struggled to handle this in a gentle manner. Impulse watched as Vlad King had to step aside when the recovery girl came closer to his bed with a clipboard in her hand. She passed it to Impulse, who stared at the weird symbols on it. Well, it did look like a document meant to be filled in. He didn't know this language. What did she call it earlier? Japanese?
Fill this in to the best of your abilities. Everything you remember to help us identify and get you back where you belong.
Yeah, sorry about that, but I can't read it. He gave the clipboard back to her and smiled apologetically. Maybe you can make one in English for me?
How peculiar.
She looked him in the eyes and slightly tilted her head.
I'll send for someone to help you. In the meantime, are you hungry? Maybe some water.
He nodded, and she left him alone with Vlad King. The man stood in place firmly, and Impulse understood that he didn't want to leave a stranger alone. Vlad King looked strong, not just because of his muscles. His confident aura could be felt in his straight posture and stern face. Perfect kind of guy to keep children in check and protect them. Impulse already trusted him as an honest man who held his word. How come you can speak perfect Japanese but can't read it? Vlad King asked him, making Impulse shrug in response. No clue. Where I'm from, we speak English mainly. I think one of my friends knows Japanese actually, though I don't know if I'm here alone or if someone ended up here too. Because I don't remember the circumstances that led me to waking up here. He hoped he wasn't alone in this world, but at the same time, he didn't wish for his friends to get in trouble. Does Exuma know he's here? Are his friends aware of his disappearance? Or are they in trouble as well? Impulse feared more for his friends than himself. Just the thought of them being alone in a dangerous world made him anxious. With no admin to protect them from harm, many of his reckless friends might get harmed or worse. Impulse didn't want to think about it. He has to stay positive. Nothing at all? Well, I think I remember the before. When I was home and everything was fine, and then suddenly I wake up here. The middle part is missing. Flag King hummed. He was so large, the hum he made was almost that of a ravager. Impulse was glad the people here were reasonable. He didn't like fighting. Conflict? Yeah, that was fun. But fighting? Ever real? No, Impulse would rather play nice and stay quiet. Shio was walking down the hall on her way to her office when a panicked Izuka Kendo ran up to her. Girl's breath was wild, and she almost collided with a wall in a hurry. As Recovery Girl wanted to ask her what happened, the 1B student said with a shaky voice, "There's another one! Another one fell in front of our dorm! He looks better and he's confused. And he's conscious."
"Are you bringing him here?"
asked the nurse, gently petting the poor girl's arm. She already did a good job commanding her classmates to urgently bring the first man here, and now that there was a second one, well, this girl was a real hero. New sets of footsteps, and another 1B student appeared with his hands being full. Their new guest wasn't out, thankfully, and Recovery Girl could see his confused expression. And she could see his eyes. There was something about his deep green eyes that made her skin crawl and tingle, even if they looked completely ordinary. She could feel something was off about him. Better look away for now. "Hello there, lady. Good morning," said the new arrival, his eyes shining brightly like magical crystals or colorful New Year lights. So warm and welcoming now. She could feel herself relaxing despite these weird circumstances. It was hard to look away. She could see his stylish, expensive suit, a lovely red color, dirty with the stains of grass and dirt. He had short brown hair and such a soft, friendly face that he seemed completely harmless. Chio couldn't tell why, but a wave of warmth towards this absolute stranger made her smile. Suddenly, to her, he seemed like another child, like someone close to her and important. "Do I have to bring him to the same room, or what?" asked the student carrying their guest, and Recovery Girl could finally tear her eyes from the stranger. "No,
"Follow me, please."
she thought it might be unwise to keep both of them in the same room, not until they learned more about them. The streets were loud and busy in the morning, people moving on with their day despite loud sounds of commotion around. Cub wandered around, his attention drawn by folks in colorful costumes who were loudly talking with the press, while the police were loading beat-up criminals into a van. Interesting. When Cub had just woken up in a crater, surrounded by rusty junk, he was lost in confusion. The last thing he remembered, Bodum people inviting him to hang out with them, Scar being especially excited about something. Then a blank void and he found himself in a landfill. Now here he was. Now he was here, in a different world, among strangers and unfamiliar architecture. This world had little to no magic. Cub couldn't feel any powerful energy around as he was walking between boring gray buildings and tired people. The difference in this place felt jarring in comparison to the cluster of worlds he was familiar with. Rules here were different, but he didn't have to know them to feel them. Because he was an alien here, the world itself could not influence him as it would its natural inhabitants. Cub was a player with a server and several admins to protect him. No other world could harm him. Cub sat down on a bench in a quiet corner where the sounds of machines and voices weren't as distracting. He took out his communicator in an attempt to contact Exuma. No luck there, sadly. The device was lagging and struggling to display the list of server members of this world. Must be a compatibility thing. Sometimes he wished he could get his hands on an admin communicator. It had more power and functions to it. But for now, he would wait until his device would stop lagging and try to contact anyone. Well, he did not have admin rights on Hermitcraft. While he did have admin rights on Hermitcraft, they did not extend to other worlds. And he was just a loss as a regular person. Well, not really. He smiled, resting his arms on the back of the bench. If this place had no admin, as he was suspecting, then it's up for grabs for anyone willing enough. No one had shown up to take him out, nor was anyone's magic tying this world together. There was no code to hack, and where there was no code or magic, there was no admin to protect everything. A regular person could probably try to assimilate and or find a way home. Cub had other plans now. His ideas had to be polished and planned out more. But for now, while he had some free time, why not take on a new project? Perhaps should other hermits turn up here as well, they would help him. Together they could accomplish more, make this new project into something great. For now, he decided he would start off small, get more data to analyze, find a place for a starter base, and some basic resources. A passerby appeared from around the corner, and it didn't take long for Cub to force them to sit down near him. Word for word, and his magic did its job. He was worried for a bit that a lack of magic in this world would affect him, but luck was on his side this time. And now he had a puppet with a brain full of important information free to use. Maybe he was a little out of practice with his more invasive techniques, but the skills were still there. The convex brilliance was nothing to sneeze at. To avoid outside intervention, he created a simple illusion and turned to face his puppet. It was a worker man, a business suit and a briefcase on him, expensive looking watch, neat haircut, office plankton of high level it seems. Wonderful, wonderful how easy it was to open his mind. So vulnerable and bendable. Cup fixated on his eyes, his own glowing blue ones reflecting back from there. Their blue glow was always a dead giveaway to anyone who knew him close enough. Cub fan 135 and Good Times with Scar had green eyes. He doesn't have to dig deep to find what he needed. Basic knowledge. Earth. What a boring name. He'd heard it before, from Ifo. Japan. An island filled with people. He heard about it from Ifo too. Though Japan he described in his tales and Japan from the man's mind were two very different countries. This one was overcrowded and filled with infrastructure, technology advanced enough, but boring and uninspired. They did not create for the purpose of creation. They had to fight for survival in this land of bureaucracy and capitalism. Perfect. Because the one Ethan described to him was comprised of high school students and half-naked people fighting gods most of the time, and, like, giant robots or monsters. And although Etho had strange taste in worlds, this one seemed just a little tamer in comparison. Quirks. Superpowers are a defining feature of an individual person. Most people had one, and Cub mentally noted that it only made things easier for him and other hermits. If they were here too, quirks could make human look as wild as a mutant or hybrid. So the world was used to all manner of appearances. Good. Cub was glad that people with so many differences lived together in relative harmony. What was upsetting in this constant struggle? A world without an admin, what a pitiful sight. People in constant fight for food, homes, and jobs. They live in fear for their lives. Cub could still remember times like these back in his own world. Humans could use a little help sometimes. With a new project in mind, Cub left his puppet to wake up on the bench, while he went to reach the first step of his plan. While his calm was out of order, he could prepare the basis for his new passion project. Energized and motivated, Cub walked through the streets with a smile on his face. Even if he was not on hermitcraft, it didn't mean he had to sit there and do nothing. Might as well take over the world while on this unplanned vacation. And that's the end of chapter 1.